Okay, so for this section we're going to look at creating shapes before we animate them, and particularly the shape tool. Okay, so if we create a new project, if you save the project as creating shapes, okay, new composition, again we'll name the composition, we'll give it the same name. You click on preset. If you select HDTV 1080-24 again, okay, duration 5, we'll leave the frame rate at 24, that's fine for this one. Okay, we're just going to change one of the preferences. So if you go to Edit, Preferences and General, and we just want to make sure, just wait for that to show, we just want to make sure that this box here is ticked center anchor point in new shape layers. Okay, so we have a centered anchor point when we create a new shape. Alright. Okay, so we're going to be using the shape tool here, so we can click and hold on the rectangle tool here and you've got the different shapes. We have the properties, so we're going to, once we've selected the shape tool here, we have the properties of the shape tool here. We've got the fill and the stroke and the thickness of the stroke. Make sure Bezier path is unchecked. So we will be creating what are called parametric shapes that have their own set of properties and are easier to manipulate as one shape. Okay, so we're going to use the shape layer here. So we're going to drag out a shape. We're going to start with a rectangle. Now if we hold down shift, that constrains that to a square shape. And then while holding down shift and the mouse button, left mouse button, if we hold down spacebar, we can also move that around. Okay, so we're going to position that. Okay, you'll also see that that automatically creates a shape layer here. To rename that, we can click on the shape layer, press enter, and then give that a unique name. Just call it rectangle for the moment. Just be careful, so we're going to make the second shape now, which is an ellipse. Okay, now if I was to click and drag this out at the moment, you'll see it creates an ellipse inside the rectangle layer. We don't want that, we want this to be a separate layer, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to delete that. Just make sure you click to deselect the previous layer and then drag out the subsequent layer. Now again, if we hold down shift, we can constrain this to a perfect circle, and again holding down spacebar at the same time we can position that. Okay, and again if we click on the layer now, press enter, we can name that one. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next shape, which is the polygon tool, and again if we drag out, now what's quite interesting with this, by default it should be set to a I think it's a pentagon, but what we can do, so keeping the mouse button pressed, if we use the up and down arrows, we can either increase or decrease the number of sides. Okay, so you can see there, or I'm going to decrease that down to a triangle, and then again I can, holding down the space bar, I can move that into position. Now again if I hold down shift, that also kind of aligns that upright. Okay, so kind of shifts it so it's upright. Okay, and I'll move that into position. Now you can see I have made a mistake here because I didn't deselect the layers here. So what I need to do is just select that object. Okay, delete it, and I need to make sure I deselect the layers before I drag that object out. Okay, and you'll see there that we now have a separate shape layer there. So again, I'm going to rename that. Okay, and we'll continue. So we've got the full selection of shapes. Now you might see here that these shapes are a bit big. I want to fit 2 more shapes on here. So what I can do is I can select them individually and just scale them down. So select, start to drag, hold down shift to constrain the drag. Okay, and then that's going to give me a bit more space. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the star tool here. Now again, this is very easy to forget. We need to deselect the layers here, select the star tool, drag out our star, and again with the up and down arrows we can add points to the star or remove. Okay, and then again holding down shift to make it upright and spacebar to position, to move. Okay, and then finally we have the rounded rectangle tool, which is at the top here, and again just remembering to deselect. Okay, so clicking in an empty space in the timeline window here, and then dragging out our rounded rectangle. So we don't want to hold down shift on this because we don't want it to be a square, we want to keep it as a rectangle. Holding down spacebar to position, and another interesting feature with this one is the up arrow increases the rounding of the corners and the down arrow decreases them, or if you press the right arrow that goes to fully rounded, left arrow goes to unrounded. Okay, so it's quite a useful little option, and again spacebar will use that to position. Okay, so I'm just going to center these up a bit. So with the selection move tool, I can drag a selection round and just shift those over a bit so they're a bit more central. Sorry, I don't want to align them on top of one another. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so just to, some of these are probably familiar to you already, but just to select a shape, and obviously we can change the fill colour here if we wish. We can change the stroke colour using the colour picker. We can also obviously change the thickness of the line. We can, if we click on the word fill rather than the colour, we also have some fill options here. We've got no colour, solid colour, we've got gradients here. Now that defaults to black and white, but if you OK that, actually before I go off that, we've also got various layer effects here which we'll look at later. Opacity, which we're familiar with. So if I click on a gradient here, OK, linear gradient for example, OK it, I can then go back and click on the fill colour, and then clicking on this box here I can select one colour for the gradient, and then click on this box here to select the second colour for the gradient to create my own gradient here. Okay. Okay, and the same applies to the stroke options here. So again, if I select the shape, click on the stroke, the word rather than the stroke itself, and again we have the same set of options: no colour, solid colour. We can apply gradients to strokes as well here. Okay, opacity and the various effects. Okay, so there we go, we've created our shapes, so we're now ready to animate the properties of these shapes we've created.